Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at the Sideshow Collectibles, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger action figure. This is a 6th scale figure, so roughly about 12 inches tall, of the Dream Slasher, Freddy Krueger. And back around the early 2000s, Sideshow just grabbed a buttload of horror licenses and cranked out a lot of iconic slasher characters and universal horror characters in their 1/6 scale line. They did everything from a couple different Freddys, they did a lot of the Jasons, they did a Michael Myers that was awful, they did 2 Leatherface figures, and they did a whole run of Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Nosferatu, a bunch of Frankensteins, Wolfman, Mummy, all that stuff. And when I first started collecting, these kind of became my holy grail items. It was kind of a weird thing because now I'm looking at Hot Toys and, picking and choosing which ones I want to pick up. Granted, I only have 2, soon to be 3, but back when I started collecting, these Sideshow figures seemed so unobtainable to me for whatever reason. Looking back, it doesn't make much sense because if I just would have stayed off of a couple 7-inch figures, I would have been able to get one of these pretty easily. But they were always something I admired because they were obviously bigger and decently detailed and had the real cloth clothing on them. And seeing this is back when I was getting the Mezco figures and stuff, it definitely is a step up in production quality to some extent. I actually managed to pick this guy up at a shop here in Jacksonville, actually before I lived in Jacksonville, that has since closed but used to carry all kinds of cool action figures and stuff. And I really lucked out because they had no set price on this guy. So when I asked how much he was, the dude behind the counter hopped on eBay and saw what one was selling for, and fortunately it was only up there for like $30, and he let me take him for that. So I thought that was pretty awesome. But let's take a closer look at Freddy here. As with any Sideshow figure, it comes with the iconic Sideshow stand, which is a 3-piece stand. We have the actual clip here. It's a waist clip. It goes around the middle of the figure. I'm missing one of the little black rubberized ends on here. It kind of stinks, but it's a metal clip. Plastic sleeve that goes into. The further down you put it, the tighter the clip gets. And that plugs, of course, into the base. So you have a Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy, decent little monochromatic picture of Freddy Krueger there, a bunch of copyright info across the bottom, which kind of stinks because it really detracts from the way the stand looks. But not a bad little stand. Now, that is kind of a weird point to me though, because according to this stand and the box that the figure came in, this is based off Freddy in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And, well, we'll get into that. Freddy also comes with his trademark fedora, which you could pop off the figure here. And it's decently detailed. It's a rubberized piece, very soft and pliable. You got some little weathering marks on here. Mine's fairly dusty, unfortunately. The inside kind of has this strip around the inside, which I guess is supposed to keep the paint from wearing off. It doesn't really work. Same problem that NECA has to this day. Still have with this one too. It's just hard to get the hat that's made out of rubber material to not scuff the paint. But pretty cool. Glad that he comes with a hat. It kind of needs it. And taking a look at the head sculpt, this is where my first complaint comes in, that this is not a Part 1 Freddy. This is definitely far, far from the makeup that he has in the original movie. This is more close akin to maybe a Part 3 or a Part 4. The burns are just this layered makeup, and as you've seen with the NECA figure, the Part 1 was almost these gaping holes, almost more like boils and burns than this, which is just kind of messed up skin. But it looks pretty good. The plastic is very, very shiny. You could probably see the light just catching off of it. It works okay for a latex encrusted character like Freddy, but it does take away a lot of the realism, just that he is so shiny and so kind of fake looking in that respect. You can see the paint wear up here at the top where the hat goes. But the sculpting detail is pretty nice. The ears are all messed up. I like the burns that are on the face. The detail on him is pretty cool. The eyes are well painted, even though they're the wrong color for Freddy. Teeth are okay. The teeth could add a little more weathering on them, maybe made them more yellow or more deformed looking. They're not really quite there. It looks enough like Robert Englund. It's not a spot on look, but it works okay. It works well enough for the character, I guess. It definitely looks like Freddy Krueger. And turn him around, you can see still more detail on the back of the head, and of course more paint scuff. At least the paint scuff kind of fits the rest of the color scheme, so it's not horribly detracting. And just in case you're wondering, the sculpt is on the neck alone, so when you pull back the shirt a little bit, it's just the plain plastic of the body. Now, the other glaring omission that makes this not a Part 1 Freddy is the sweater. The arms on this sweater are striped, which came in every other movie besides Part 1. Part 1, he had just red sleeves, so this very much takes it out of that realm. Now, I have seen people actually do a minor mod on this figure where they've unstitched the shoulders and it's just red inside of these sleeves. So they've actually reversed the sleeves and sewn them back on to give Freddy the red sleeves. This doesn't fix the head sculpt, of course, but it's an interesting modification, and if you wanted to use the sweater for another figure, it works pretty well. A sweater is another big area of gripe for me too. Around the neck, he kind of has this fringe. For a lot of people call it the Kermit the Frog fringe. It doesn't look that good. Same around the bottom. It's supposed to be weathered and torn up, but mine just sticks straight up and there's nothing I could do to fix it. It just is blah looking. It will not hang down and it just does not look good. It doesn't look like natural tattering. Just not good at all. And the sweater doesn't really have any weathering on it. It's not a bright, new-looking sweater, but it doesn't look dirty or burnt or anything like that. It's also a little baggy on the body. Same little fringes here down at the wrists, just not great detail. Freddy's left hand is fairly well sculpted, more of the same burns we have on the rest of the body, some cool, gnarly little fingernails on here. Pretty nice looking. They did a decent job on the hand. That's pretty much an open hand, not much you could do with it. Another complaint is because they did not paint or sculpt on the rest of the body, once you get past the sleeve, there's no sculpting there. So if the sleeve pulls back at all from stretching on the figure, you're gonna see that just plain flesh tone, which really sucks. Over on the glove side, they did pretty well there too. There's some good sculpting on the palm, some nice metallic looking copper paint on there. The glove's a nice leather look. The blades leave a little to be desired. You can see these have cracked and been re-glued. I don't even think that was me. I think that's how I got the figure because it was open when I bought it, but not a bad little glove. The pants, once again, feel too baggy for the character, and they are very not weathered, very plain too. And the boots are just fine. They're these hard rubber boots. There's no real laces on them or anything like that. Not a whole lot of paint detail, but they're decent. Now, of course, being a 1/6 scale figure, articulation's where this guy really excels. His head is on a great joint. You can move side to side, forward and back, as well as turning, which gives you a great range of motion there. Shoulders, pin socket, you go forward, back, out to the side, only hindered by the sweater. Swivel at the upper arm. I believe it's a double jointed elbow in here. The wrist is on a nice peg system where it can hinge as well as rotate, so you can have it bend every which way you want. The fingers on the glove here are actually somewhat articulated, not a whole lot, and they don't like to hold their pose, but you can move them, which is pretty cool. It's a mid-torso joint up here. Swivel at the waist. Legs can go forward and back and out to the side very easily. Swivel at the upper leg, double jointed at the knee, and the foot bend is there but not very easily obtained because of the hard boot. One plus side with this stand is because the sweater is baggy, when you clamp it around his waist, you can kind of drape the sweater over it and pretty much hide the connection point so it doesn't look pinched like some of the other figures do on this stand. Sometimes it will pinch around the waist, so you put it above the clothes if you have to, like my Jason Goes to Hell goes that way, and it just really looks awful. So overall, I feel like this Freddy figure is kind of a mixed bag. He has some very, very good qualities to him. The articulation is very nice. The fact that he is a 6 scale figure, kind of a lot more to him. The clothing's not bad. The sweater leaves a lot to be desired, but the articulation in the glove's kind of cool. The detail on him works. The scarring looks decent, even if it's not totally movie accurate. The stand, to me, is a nice way to display him. He does stand okay without it, too. And I'm gonna give him a recommend. He's not a great action figure, but he works pretty well. Slashers like Freddy and Jason is a line that I really wish Hot Toys would pick up. I don't think they're ever going to, and that disappoints me, but I would just love to see them take on that license and make something spectacular. As far as I know, nobody really has or is doing anything with a 1/6 scale license for any of the classic horror slashers, or any real classic horror characters. No Dracula, no Frankenstein, no nothing. None of those guys are being done by anybody in 6 scale right now. It's all been left to customizers, and there are some amazing customs. If you look up the work of One's Customs or Beto Metalli, or I can't even think of some of the other ones, but there are some amazing Freddy customs out there. But it would just be nice if they made a real mass-produced one, because honestly, the hardest part about doing a Freddy custom is the fact that the sweater is hard to do, hard to come by. You either can cannibalize one of these figures or that old Mezco 12-inch figure and customize that sweater, which that was actually a much nicer sweater. So it does make getting more Freddys a little harder. Now, Sideshow did, I believe, 4 other Freddys. They did a Part 3 exclusive, which I believe came with the skeleton version of himself. And I didn't really care for the head sculpt on that one. And plus it's harder to get and more expensive. They did a new Nightmare, which also had kind of a wonky head sculpt. One of those figures that's constantly looking off to the side, and you know how I feel about those. Blah. And they did 2 Freddy vs. Jason versions. They did just the normal Springwood Slasher, which had an exclusive with the Camp Crystal Lake t-shirt. And then they did the Robert Englund Unburnt one, which is probably the only other one I'd really want to pick up because he's pretty cool looking. But as I myself got more into making custom figures, I realized that Sideshow wasn't exactly the way to go for me. I could kind of make my own custom horror villains as opposed to trying to buy these ones that are just decent. They're not horrible, but they're not wonderful. But if you don't have the skills to do that, or the inclination, or you don't want to go and buy a custom figure, you could track these guys down on eBay for probably a reasonable price. I've seen them vary as time goes, and they're not going to be dirt cheap, but you can get your hands on them without paying through the nose. So I definitely recommend, if you're into this kind of thing, to go and check out eBay and see which ones you could dig up. All the ones I've ever seen look like they're fairly decent outside of that Michael Myers. That thing's just an abomination. I almost wish I had it just to show how bad it is. Make sure you check out Outside the Box Reviews on Facebook. There'll be a link below as always. And until next time, this has been another Outside the Box Reviews, and I'll see you in your nightmares.